Good afternoon and welcome. We're pleased and honored to have you here. This afternoon we gathered to celebrate 250 years of American spirit, a legacy shaped by vision, courage, and a steadfast belief in possibility. Across generations, that spirit has revealed itself in moments, both historic and human, each one contributing to the story we share today. It is a spirit that has inspired discovery and achievement, and one that continues to remind us of what can be accomplished through imagination, determination, and unity. And now please welcome the Associate Conductor of the Coastal Communities Concert Band, Dr. Bruce Mansfield. Please stand for our national anthem. We open our concert with a piece that captures American spirit in a way many of us recognize. Return to the Moon, Fanfare for Artemis II by Henry Dellinger was inspired by NASA's Artemis II mission, a return to the moon that reconnects us with a moment that once brought the whole country together in awe. There's a sense of excitement in this music and also something familiar, an echo of that shared pride and wonder. Please enjoy Return to the Moon, Fanfare for Artemis II by Henry Dellinger, featuring our brass and percussion sections. travel back to the time of the American Revolution through a melody that helped define the spirit of that era. Composer William Schumann used a tune written by early American composer William Billings in the 1770s on which to base our next selection. This tune was called Chester and quickly became one of the most popular hymns in the colonies, often sung not only in churches, but also in gatherings that expressed growing unity and independence. Its text spoke of freedom and self-determination, ideas that were just beginning to take hold. William Schumann reimagines this historic melody for modern concert band, expanding it into a bold and dramatic work. You'll hear echoes of its original simplicity, but also sweeping textures and rich harmonies that reflect how far that spirit has traveled over the past 250 years. Please enjoy Chester Overture by William Schumann. Concord by Claire Grundman is named for the small town in Massachusetts that became one of the first places where ordinary citizens stood their ground in the name of a new and untested idea, independence. It is based on 3 traditional tunes from Old New England, the White Cockade, William Billings' America, and Yankee Doodle. The White Cockade is a fife and drum marching tune widely known during the days of the American Revolution. It had also played a part in the British military tradition. It was a little rosette that they wore on their hats in Scotland to show their unity. America was written by William Billings, whose tune Chester we just heard. Billings was an ardent patriot, amateur musician, and tanner by trade. He attempted to create a new kind of hymn for the New England church, which resulted in an outpouring of hymn tunes such as America, which reflects the independent spirit of the young nation at its birth. Yankee Doodle is one of America's most recognizable folk tunes and is closely associated with the Revolutionary War. Although its exact origins remain uncertain, the melody was widely known throughout the American colonies by the mid-1700s. Popular as a tune for jigs and country dances, it was embraced by the colonists and eventually became a spirited symbol of American independence and patriotism. This work was commissioned by and dedicated to the President's own United States Marine Band in Washington, D.C. It was premiered by that organization at a concert in Washington, D.C. on July 15, 1987. And now, Concord by Claire Grundman. As we move into the Civil War era, we'll hear music that once filled everyday American life, around campfires, in family parlors, and on the march. American Civil War Fantasy was composed in 1961 by Jerry H. Billick, who happened to be a classmate of our own piccolo player, Eleanor Tibbles Pennington, at the University of Michigan. The work was originally written for a spectacular University of Michigan halftime show that culminated with an American flag stretching all the way across the football field. This is a piece that truly tells a story. It begins with scenes of everyday life featuring familiar melodies such as Listen to the Mockingbird, Dixieland, and Camptown Races. But in the distance, another tune begins to emerge, John Brown's Body, and suddenly you sense that the nation is changing. As tensions rise, songs from both North and South begin to intertwine and answer one another. Dixie, the battle cry of freedom, Maryland, my Maryland, when Johnny comes marching home, just before the battle, mother, marching through Georgia and the yellow rose of Texas. The music grows in intensity, carrying us through conflict, struggle, and uncertainty before turning toward a quieter and more reflective conclusion. Rather than reveal how the story ends, we'll let the music speak for itself. Please enjoy American Civil War Fantasy by Jerry H. Billick. We'd like to take a moment now to ask, how many of you are hearing our band for the very first time today? Well, welcome to you. We're very happy to have you here. And how many of you are regulars at our concerts? Hello. And do we have any former band members or families of band members here today? Yeah, I've seen some of you today. Thank you for coming. We're so glad to have you here with us for this extra special celebration of America's 250th. This next presentation brings us to one of the most solemn and defining moments in our nation's history. In November of 1863, on the fields of Gettysburg, thousands had fallen, and a nation was struggling to understand the cost of its own division. It was there, in the midst of loss and uncertainty, that President Abraham Lincoln rose to speak. His words were brief, but they gave meaning to sacrifice and hope to a nation still in the midst of war. Today we return to that moment through the music of Randy Edelman from the 1993 film Gettysburg. We are honored to welcome Abraham Lincoln interpreter Robert Brodsky, who will bring the Gettysburg Address to life, allowing us to hear those words as they might have been spoken on that day. Please hold your applause after President Lincoln finishes speaking, as you will hear an antiphonal performance of Old 100, the same hymn that was sung at the original ceremony, its sound carrying across the gathering as a moment of shared remembrance. And now please welcome our 16th President, Abraham Lincoln.
A new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation, so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We're met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But, I'm sorry. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men living and dead who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little know or long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here, dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom. And that government, of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
We'll take a brief intermission, but Mr. Lincoln is happy to meet with you in the lobby if you care to have a photograph or shake his hand. He'd like an invitation to the theater as well. We'll see you in about 15 minutes.